They don't call it high-performing autism anymore. This is included in the ADHD sphere. Oh, yeah. It's like, oh, yeah. I remember as a kid as, like, being diagnosed with high-functioning autism. And, of course, at that point, your only experience with autism was, like, the special kid you had in class.
Yeah.
And so, like, in my mind, at 13, I'm just like, how does that make any fucking sense? I've seen what this looks like. How is it high functioning? Evidently, the entire medical community agreed with me because they don't use that term anymore. It's like, well, that's kind of a stupid term to have. Wow, at 13, I was onto something.
You've always been ahead of your time.
I've always said autism is way too broadly defined because it's like you'll hear it's like, oh, autism affects everyone differently. Then how do we know? How do we, if it affects everyone differently, how do we know it exists? How do we differentiate autism from like someone's personality? It's like I said, we still have this problem. It's like the way we define and categorize autism has just never been it's never been good. It has always been the biggest flaw.
Yeah.
I mean, like it was a problem. It's a problem now when everything is filed under autism spectrum disorder, and it was a problem back when you had 18 different terms to all mean the same thing. Hey, what's the difference? It's like, oh yeah, it's like, I heard this routinely, and only to learn that they were all the same thing later on. It's like, 1 year, oh yeah, you have a high-functioning autism. The next year, oh, you have Asperger's syndrome. The next year, oh, you have pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified. And every time I'm just like, what do any of these fucking words mean? Because, like, here's the thing. Attention deficit disorder is immediately clear as to what it's talking about. This is my fucking issue I've always had with the mental health field. Attention deficit disorder is immediately clear as to what it means. Hell, even antisocial personality disorder is very clear as to what the fuck it means. Post-traumatic stress disorder is the king of being clear as to what the fuck it means. Everyone understands PTSD just from the name alone. But autism is always called fucking overly clinical shit, and no one knows what it fucking means.
Yeah, and it seems like those clinical terms keep changing.
Yeah, they keep they have jargon clinical terms that mean nothing, and they switch it out for more jargon that means nothing. Is it any wonder you got so many parents who think like, oh, my child's autistic, therefore I can just take my hands off the reins, and now I'm blameless in everything?
Ugh.
Which is like the number one problem autistic people end up facing, is that their critical time of development is utterly hamstrung by the fact that simply being autistic will cause you to be subjected to abuse by your parents and your teachers. It is a very high chance. And that affects autistic children way more than just their autism on its own does. We want to call you the R slur, but we still want it to sound professional disease. That's exactly what it is. It's the neurodivergent equivalent of queer.
Oh.
And it's so fucking dumb. Like, guys, just learn how to fucking name shit. Because this is another problem with like oppositional defiance disorder, which is like that's the one I hate the most. That's the one I fucking hate the most. Because oppositional defiance disorder is like this disorder characterized by persistent defiance and opposition to authority figures. Now, the problem with labeling this as a disorder is that this is only a concern, like the only children are diagnosed with this because it's only children for whom this is considered a problem. So already you're starting on shaky ground as you're trying to pathologize something. You're trying to pathologize something on that only exists on a societal level.
Right.
But the thing is that because of its name suggests that it's just this compulsive, unexplainable opposition and like resistance to authority. Like, there's nothing you can do. Like, there's nothing you can do. Well, there's nothing we can do. Our child is just sick. The problem is, the risk factors for oppositional defiance disorder are abuse, 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 and abuse. And also living in, like, high-risk areas that have, like... And also living with high-risk areas. Or if your parents are addicts. You know, shit like that. So... Oppositional defiance disorder does actually mean something, but its name is terrible. It should be called battered child syndrome.
Yeah, that would get the point across.
Because if your child is being diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder, that means they're being abused. Either it's you, or it's someone else. What a shock! I was diagnosed with oppositional defiance disorder. Huh! I wonder what caused it. Because you see, what oppositional defiance disorder actually is it is a completely reasonable reaction to hostile stimuli. Children react badly when you treat them like shit. This is not something that requires its own disorder. This is just a basic common social function. Children react badly to people who mistreat them. Children don't respect people who mistreat them. Children won't obey people who are mean to them. This is a fucking surprise. What do you think about adult ODD, Lily? There's adult ODD? Oh, I've got to look this up. Oppositional defiance disorder in adults. Oh my god.
Uh-oh.
An adult with oppositional defiant disorder may feel mad about the world and lose his temper regularly, even daily. The world is fucking garbage! There's many things to be mad about! I'm gonna beat whoever came up with this idea. So, here's the kicker. What's often expected is that a child diagnosed with ODD will be diagnosed with conduct disorder in their adolescence, and then antisocial personality disorder as an adult, because you're not allowed to diagnose children with a personality disorder. So they made up a new, special, children-only personality disorder. The reality of the situation here, though, is most kids with oppositional defiance disorder grow up to be diagnosed with PTSD, or CPTSD. And that's because, as an adult, you go to therapy on your terms, and your behavioral issues as a child aren't important, and you can just omit that from your therapist. You no longer have your parents, because like as an adult, you're not getting diagnosed based on the word of your parents. Because that was the problem I had as a child. Like, you know, oftentimes I would be diagnosed by doctors who I spent a whole 3 minutes talking to. I would be like 7 years old. I'm taking to a psychiatrist, and then I'm sent into like a playroom that has a two-way mirror, and I'm in there for an hour and a half while my parents talk to the psychiatrist. Dr. Carey was his name, and I'm being diagnosed and prescribed medication based on that. Based on that alone. Most of my time is not spent talking to a doctor. My parents are the ones talking to a doctor who are basically who are under the sincere belief that they are doing nothing wrong. Yeah, adult ODD is a fucking wacky concept. Yeah, I'm gonna fucking beat whichever doctor came up with that one. Ever since here's the thing. Ever since I've been to college, like, this shit has just pissed me off more and more and more because you will see the depths to which, like, this utter inability to communicate concepts to the layman, how much that contributes to mental health stigma. It's a lot. Oh. It contributes a lot. It's like, hey, you want to know the main contributing factor as to why narcissistic personality disorder is so stigmatized and so villainized? It's because they fucking called it narcissistic personality disorder. No shit, it's stigmatized. You literally diagnose someone with selfish asshole disease.
Ugh.
And like, you guys don't even look up what narcissist means before you start fucking doing this shit. Why hasn't this been renamed? I imagine, like, a lot of the stigma around schizophrenia is probably down to the fact that, like, one, it has schizo in the name, and we're all familiar with the term schizoid. And two, schizophrenia just sounds frightening.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the doctor who discovered and named shanks you in the back with a knife when you turn away from them disorder is shocked that people with this disorder are stigmatized as horrible people.
Oh boy.
Cause, like, you'd be surprised how much, like, naming something is, how important naming something is, how important the name of a disorder affects how people view it. Nobody fucking villainizes ADHD. ADHD is seen as something cute and quirky, which is a whole other problem, but, like...
Yeah.
And that's because of its name, Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. Because that's... Everybody, like... PTSD throughout the years has always had immediately clear and obvious names. Shell shock, battle fatigue, operational exhaustion, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Mm-hmm.
Hell, before then it was called nostalgia.
Oh, shit.
It has always had, like, ironically, for such a horrible thing to suffer through, it has always had gentle-sounding names. Like, imagine if narcissistic personality disorder was renamed to pathological insecurity. You'd solve so many goddamn problems. You would immediately communicate what is actually going on. Because the way people talk about people with NPD, they talk about them like they're fucking demons. When in reality, people with NPD, they have extremely low self-worth, and they get their validation from external sources. Which is why, when they hear criticism, they tend to react poorly, because it is validating all the negative things they believe about themselves. And that's it. That's the disorder. Oh, but no, we've got to deal with like 1,800 pages of pop psychology because someone on a Reddit post could just swear that after getting into an argument with their shitty ex, they looked up at them and their eyes had turned black and they were smirking like they were proud of themselves. Definitely, I'm totally not lying my ass off. It's like the more you understand about how people work and like how mental health works, the more a lot of it just seems mundane. A lot of it just stops being frightening. Like, my perception of my parents has changed a lot over the years, just from the realization that like a lot of the abuse I suffered is generational.
Oh, right.
Like when I came to the realization that like my father was raised in a very particular way. He was raised by a man who was a dick to his kids. He was an asshole to his kids, and he cheated on his wife. And whenever my father complained about how he was treated, he was always given the same thing. It's my house, my rules. When you own the house, you can make whatever tyrannical rules you want. So it was basically, one day, I will have the boot. And then he got his own house, and he had his own kids. And he did the same thing. And he did the same thing, and he gave us the same excuse. Only we didn't take it. We didn't take it. That was like, oh, it's my house, my rules. When you own the house, you can make the rules. And it's just like, no. You have literally taught me my entire life to treat others the way you want to be treated. And, of course, he always reacted very badly to that. Like, really, he lashed out. Like, the fact that he wasn't respected, like, he got so angry about that. And, of course, like, I kind of realize is that, in his eyes, an unspoken agreement had been broken. I put up with this as a child, now you're supposed to put up with it. And so in his eyes, I had broken an agreement that I never actually made.
Good Lord.
And the truth is, it wasn't really me he was mad at. I mean, yeah, think about this. If you basically bend to your parents' abuse on the basis that, like, oh, you could just do this to your children, if it's like one day you'll own the house and you can do this to your children, and then you have children and they just straight up don't take that crap, you'd probably be coming under the realization of, fuck, not putting up with that shit was always an option. Because my father did everything to me. He, like, he took my door, he, like, emptied my room of everything but a bed. I was often, like, grounded for upwards of a year at a time. He would hit me. He would subject me to manual labor. He would do anything possible to get me to respect him and behave and follow his rules, and it never worked. And I never broke.
Hell yeah.
Only one person in that house ever broke me, and it wasn't him.
Right.
And that ends up being and of course, like, when you look at all that, it's a hell of a lot less dramatic than my father is out to get me because he's just evil.
Yeah.
Like, no, he is a product of the system that raised him. Morally speaking, children are entirely capable of putting two and two together when things are wrong. Yep. Always have been. And it's it makes it clear that, like, this really wasn't about me. If it had been anyone else, the reaction would have been the same.
Oh, yeah.
It's like in the realization that, like, Courtney's abuse of me was just largely caused by the fact that Dad never gave her any attention. Because, you know, our father was, like, big on negative reinforcement. He would ignore positive behavior because that's what you're supposed to do. That was his rationale. It's like, that's what's expected of you. And he would punish bad behavior, which meant Courtney, who didn't get caught misbehaving, received basically no attention. And me and Cameron, who fought with him at every turn, did. It's one of the reasons Courtney often resented me, because, again, I was getting attention from our father that she wasn't getting. And she had largely swallowed Dad's bullshit about me, so she never really grasped or realized that Dad's attention was something to be avoided at all costs.
Oh, yeah.
So, like, on the odd, rare occasion that Dad would yell at her, she would be, like, very quiet and just... She would be, like, very quiet, not looking at him, you know, taking the lecture as this is expected of her. Of course, like, the more and more Dad yelled at me and our brother, the more we would just yell back. He threatens us, we threaten him back.
Nice.
He hurts us, we hurt him back. Because we had no respect for him because of just the way he behaved. The way it's like he wanted respect, but he didn't want to be respectable. And a lot of it is just shit his father taught him. And as I said, parenting isn't logical, it's ideological. People come into having children with ideas of how parenting is supposed to be done. Like, in a moral sense. This is how you are supposed to raise children. And if it doesn't work, the only solution is to do it more.
Yeah.
If the child misbehaves, it's the child's fault. Because they weren't trying hard enough. You need to discipline them more. And so a lot of people just, very few parents... I've always said it's like, if you could go back in time and say one thing to your parents, what would it be? And it's very simple. Insanity is doing the exact same fucking thing over and over again, expecting shit to change. Mm-hmm. Like, if I could go back in time and be my own therapist, I would just say to my parents, like, you have tried this approach so many times and it never works. You try to be a disciplinarian and she pushes back. You try harder to be a disciplinarian and she pushes back harder. You try even more and she pushes back. You punish her, you take away her privileges, you take away everything out of her room, you take her door off her wall, and she doesn't respect you. It doesn't work. Do something else. It's like, you can't keep doing this expecting it to magically get different results. If you keep trying, you are going to get the same results. These are the results you get. These are the results this parenting style has gotten you. Absorb that. Do something different.
Indeed.
The truth be told, after a certain point, I just don't think it really wouldn't have made a difference. Because, like, here's the thing. Like I said, mistakes you make raising your kids when they're little is going to come back and bite you in the ass when they're older.
Oh.
Because, sure, when they're small, you can yell and scream and intimidate because you're big and they're small. But eventually they will be big. And what are you going to do? When your entire parenting style revolves around physical intimidation, what are you going to do when she's the same height as you and can knock you on your ass? Because it's like, you know, because the way you're going, she's gonna want to. And, like, after a certain point, you can only mistreat a child for so long before they just kind of conclude that, or at least this was the case with me. By the time I was 14, I had kind of just come to the conclusion that Dad's never going to be happy. He's always going to have something to complain about. Even when I do well, he had something to complain about because his whole thing was to only focus on the negatives because the positives were expected of you.
Yeah. And, like, that's the kind of thing.
Go on.
That's the kind of thing where I would say is like you can't just ignore desired behavior and punish undesired behavior. That's how Carthage lost the Punic Wars, and they'd look at me as like, what?
Yeah. Because, like, yeah, after a certain point, because people don't really consider this. They don't consider that, like, yeah, your child has an opinion of you. And a lot of parents basically go, oh, well, that doesn't matter. It's not a popularity contest. No, it is a popularity contest. So after a certain point, it was like, Dad's never going to be happy. It doesn't matter. So I would just not show him my, like, eventually it was like, let me see your report card. And I was like, I don't have it. It's like, why? Because I looked at it and then I threw it out. I'm supposed to see that. Good for you. Complain to the school if it matters to you. There was no point in showing it to him. He was just going to bitch and moan about it anyway. I already knew how he was going to react. There was no point. Oftentimes, schools would threaten me with like, well, if you continue like this, we're gonna have to call your father. And I'm just like, well, you're gonna call my father anyway, and he's gonna scream at me anyway. Look, when he gets home from work today, he's gonna yell at me. He's either gonna make something up or it's gonna be over what you tell him. So it makes no difference to me.
Yeah.
The perception of my father as just a terminally angry, outraged son of a bitch who was never happy with anything and would take out his anger at other things like his own shitty childhood and his terrible job at the time was just like he's gonna do that anyway. There's no point in like trying to appease him because if I try to appease him, he will just yell anyway. So it doesn't matter. So on top of that, I kind of just stopped trying at anything, really. Because, you know, again, it's like the mind of a 14-year-old. I don't think about how slacking off to the extreme in high school might hurt me later down the line. It's like, because, you know, that's vaguely off in the distance. I can't even comprehend the concept. Like, it's like, oh, you need to do your schoolwork, and I'm like, why? What's the point? Because, like, in my mind, I wasn't gonna live past 20 anyway.
Well, I'm glad you did make it this far because I love being married to you.
Aw. Like, at this point, I was going through things at home that made my father look like a kitten in comparison.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh, well, you know, your father's going to be mad at you. You could set your clock to my father being mad at me. It's just this, you end up in this kind of nihilism because the main reason that children and teenagers do anything is for their parents to be proud of them. And if they never get it, if nothing they do is ever good enough, they stop trying. As a result, I'm not a particularly ambitious person. I'm fine with making enough, you know, in terms of people that say, it's like, well, your channel hasn't really grown much over the years. Who cares? I make enough.
Yeah.
I'm not out to wring hundreds of thousands of dollars out of the YouTube ecosystem. I make enough. It's like, oh, well, you could make a lot more money if you did this. Yes, but that would require a lot more work. Happy you made it this far, and I hope you'll keep going for years and years to come. Oh, thanks. Enough is enough, genuinely. Yeah, I'm one of those people where if they implemented universal basic income, I would stop working. I would legit quit my job and stop making YouTube videos. Well, maybe I'd still make videos, but like once in a while about shit I really give a shit about.
Nice.
I work as much as I need in order to like live and get by. I don't want my whole life to be I don't want my whole life to be consumed by work the way it is for most people. That
Agreed.
just sounds utterly fucking miserable. An utterly miserable way to live. And I have been miserable for long enough. That's like, after everything I was put through in like 2006 and 2007, that is enough misery for one lifetime.
Yeesh.
What point was I trying to make here? Right, yeah. Yeah, parents often just don't consider that, that, like, yeah, in actually establishing real respect and trust with your child is, like, really fucking important. Like, you can't just have your child hate you. That is going to cause problems. Because a child that hates you is a child who doesn't tell you where they're going. Is a child who goes missing and no one knows where they are. Is a child who fucks around and finds out. Is a child who doesn't feel safe coming to you when they are being hurt.
Right.
But people don't think about that. Because, like, I said this, nobody has ever had a baby with thinking I want an opinionated teenager. It's always I want a baby. It's never I want an opinionated teenager, which is why teenagers tend to not get adopted.
Right.
I said, like, and circles back to, like, the mental health field does not help matters when they then diagnose children with extremely clinical sounding disorders that all softly reinforce what a parent wants to be true. I like putting on your Pokemon video for background noise. I recently got struck by the desire to replay Pokemon Emerald for the first time since I was a kid. As a child, I was very much into the tight matchups and overgrind until I can one-shot everything kind of playing. But your comments on strategy stuck at my mind, so I tried a different approach and did a Nuzlocke for the first time ever and went easy on the grinding. And it was so fun strategizing around a limited, not overpowered team. I liked it so much I ended up abandoning the Nuzlocke because I got very attached to the Pokemon on my team and didn't want to lose them thanks to the inspiration.
Aww.
Hey.
Hey.
Yeah, but what do you mean I can't have 6 Trubbish on my team? Fuck you, I will.
How's that Psych 101 class going?
It's only day 3, but I understand how the whole world works now.